Hi and welcome to this short video on how to answer question 2E in the National 5 Physical Education portfolio. And as you can see, the learning intention for this is that you should be able to interpret data and relate its meaning to your own performance. The success criteria is that I want you to be able to identify your strengths and weaknesses through looking at the data we collected earlier in the course, and then I want you to be able to describe how these strengths and your development needs or weaknesses are shown in your chosen activity. So how do they actually show up? What happens in your chosen activity as a result of something being a strength or a weakness of yours? And through doing this, we'll prepare to answer question 2E in the portfolio. Okay, the question for 2E is, from the data you have gathered, describe your strengths and development needs in relation to your performance for both factors, and it's worth 4 marks. I'm going to talk to you a wee bit how to answer this question, so let's look at that just now. So to answer it, first of all, I need you to look back at the data you collected in your performance. We did this earlier in the course. We collected data on the physical factor, and then either in the mental or the emotional factor, depending on which your class looked at. So you're going to look back at that data and you're going to use that information to identify what your strengths are and what your development needs are. Development needs or weaknesses. Okay, those terms are just going to be interchangeable. For the physical, you're going to look back at the scores you got for the standard tests. You're going to compare those scores to your normal values, and then you're going to see which rating you gave yourself, with your best rating being your strength and your worst rating being your weakness or your area needed of development. For the mental or the emotional, you need to look back at your performance profiling wheel. When you do that, you'll see the factors that you gave strong scores for and those that you gave weak scores for, and your strongest score would be your strength and your weakest score obviously would be your weakness. After having done that, you need to consider situations where the factors you've identified as your strengths and weaknesses might either help or hinder your performance in your chosen sport. When you're doing this, I want you to give actual examples of what might happen in the sport because one of the factors is a strength of yours, or if it's a weakness. So you're going to be looking at something that might be a positive, if it's a strength, a situation where that factor is helping you to perform well, and if it's a weakness, you'll be looking at situations where that factor has a negative effect on your performance. And then the final part of 1 point would be, I'm looking for you to explain what happens as a result of that. So if it's a strength, in what ways does that strength help you or your team be successful within the sport? And if it's a weakness, you'll be looking to say in what ways that this weakness results in your team maybe not being successful or getting beaten in the sport or losing a goal, that sort of thing. So what is the outcome as a result of that being a weakness? Here's a quick example. So from the data, I can see that my physical strength is my CRE, my cardiorespiratory endurance. I know this because my score in the bleep test was level 11, shuttle 4. This puts me in the above category for my age. During a game of basketball, my good CRE allows me to get back in defence after an attack, even towards the end of the game. This means that I am able to put pressure on my opponent when they are shooting. This will increase the chances of them missing and my team keeping the lead in the match. So I went through each of the 3 stages to give you that example. Okay, carrying on then, the command word is describe. So you really want to paint a real clear picture using your words so that the reader can actually picture what's happening. So try to be as detailed and as clear as possible. And the question's worth 4 marks, so you need to give 4 points in total. It also asks about your strengths and development needs. So to answer this, you need to give a strength and a development need for the physical factor and a strength and a development need for the mental or emotional factor, whichever one your class was focused on. To help you prepare to answer this question, we've got a workbook task. You'll find that in pages 13 and 14 of your workbook. There's space there for you to answer on the physical factor, a strength and a weakness for the physical factor, and then the same for the mental or emotional, whichever your class is focused on. Again, a strength and a weakness. Then the following slides, there's a couple more slides to go in this video. That will show you the type of information I'm looking when doing this workbook task. I'm looking for when doing this workbook task. And also we've given out a factors booklet, so if you're maybe uncertain about how a factor might impact on your performance within your chosen sport, there's some examples in there and some more information on the factors, and you can hopefully use that to think about how the factors impact on your chosen sport. Okay, just again on the workbook task, how to answer about your strength. So you can see that looks exactly the same as what it does in your book, but for the physical strength. And again, just going over what I've already said, you're going to look at the data. You've got that in your workbook already, so look back at that, identify what factor is your strength within the physical factor. You're going to then include that in your answer, include the data within your answer and how you know this is a strength. And then you're going on to talk about your focus sport here, giving an example and describing a way that this factor helps when you're performing. So it's a clear, detailed and expanded example. So a wee bit of writing in there so it's clear for the person reading it exactly what's happening. And then the final part of your answer, this means that in a game, so I'm really looking for you to describe what happens as a result of that strength. So how does it help your team to be successful? Okay, and finally, just looking at this, a similar slide, but looking at the development needs section. So the information here is very similar to that on the previous slide, but just looking at it from the other aspect, from the aspect of your weaknesses. So again, you're going to look at the data you've collected, identify what are your main weaknesses within the physical factor, and then within it either the emotional or mental factor. You're going to include the data in your answer, and if you can, you're going to give some information about how you know that's a weakness. So maybe in comparison to the other data you collected, if you're talking about the performance profiling wheel, or if it's in your standard tests, you're just looking at what your strongest scores were, or in this case, your weakest scores. Then when you've done that, you're going to go on to talk about your focus sport. So you're going to give an example of a way that factor has a negative impact on your performance when you're playing. So you're going to give a clear, detailed and expanded example of how that factor can have a negative effect on you. And then finally, going on to say about how that results in your team maybe not being successful or preventing you from being successful within the game situation.